The cover page of One Piece Chapter 1096, titled Kumachi, features Zoro's crushing defeat against a pack of chihuahuas during a game of musical chairs. And it looks like our boy might have gotten lost going from chair to chair. And thanks to that, they've won his sword, Wado Ichimonji. Not only is this one of the 21 great grade swords, and the one he's had the longest, it's also his only memento of his late friend Kuina. Yikes. Zoro's gambled his own arm against a cursed blade with no hesitation and won. But this time, he wasn't so lucky. From there, either he gambles Kitetsu and Enma next, or he'll have to get used to two-sword style because you really don't want to make chihuahuas mad. Also, do you guys think there's a Zoan Devil Fruit model for every dog breed? I mean, we've already seen a Dachshund and Yamato's mythical version. Shiba Inus are native to Japan, so maybe there's a Doge fruit somewhere out there. Anyways, we return to our God Valley flashback with the Celestial Dragon speaking about rabbits instead of dogs. The native cleansing festival was close to starting. As their targets ran, the announcer let everyone know that there were 150 rare rabbits, or people, for them to hunt down. There were also 13 super rare rabbits among them that were each worth 10,000 points. The spacesuit-wearing monsters were also reminded that one-hit kills would also land them bonus points for skill. The winners of this event were then promised amazing rewards. Pigarland Garling couldn't look more like Shanks if he tried, as he told his competition to just sit back and watch him dominate. Another celestial dragon with a large gun and hat with obscured eyes claimed that the Man-Mayer family would be the winners. Now, excuse me for sounding like one of those red circle One Piece theorists, but the shape of this person's face and outstretched tongue totally remind me of Vegapunk York. Taking a shot in the dark and assuming that there is some level of connection here, this could explain why York was vile enough to betray her fellow Vegapunks in pursuit of becoming a celestial dragon. We know surprisingly little about the individual Vegapunk satellites. Well, maybe it's not that surprising since Oda tends to remind us of how little we know about this world on a weekly basis. We've got biological Vegapunks, robotic Vegapunks, big Vegapunks, and small Vegapunks. There's next to no consistency or similarity between their appearances. We don't know if they were all made at the same time, when they were made, or which ones came first. But we do know that Vegapunk is no stranger to manipulating lineage factors and creating clones. We know that celestial dragons aren't all inherently evil, thanks to characters like Corazon and Mjosgard. But we also know that lineage factors contain elements well beyond our current understanding of DNA. As Snake has an inherent crush on Luffy and obeys his orders because Boa Hancock does. It might sound foolish of Stella not to have considered that when making her one of his satellites, but maybe the value of this person's lineage factor was too useful to pass up. Vegapunk York's entire job was to eat, sleep, and release, so the other Vegapunks wouldn't have to and could keep working. This could be an inherent ability of the Man-Mayer family, the power of an unknown devil fruit, or this celestial dragon's power. And up until recently, Vegapunk had no problem working with the world government's backing, so it might not have ever crossed his mind as a conflict of interest. I honestly hope this is the connection because it sounds really cool to me, but let me know what you guys think. Next up, we have a guy with an Akira Toriyama gas mask on that tells Garling not to expect an easy victory here. Now this is pretty crazy. We've seen this character design before. One of the House of Lamb's orphans that grew up with Big Mom always wore a mask just like this. We know that Mother Caramel planned on selling all of them to the world government, but her and all the lambs were believed to have been eaten by Linlin during a feeding frenzy. Could this be a survivor that managed to be collected by the world government? Well, even if that is the case, how the heck did he end up being a celestial dragon? Expanded theory aside, the 5 elders are willing to consider Vegapunk York a celestial dragon if they manage to secure her. So you could argue that a person can be accepted as a celestial dragon if they weren't outright born one. But for York, that's in exchange for producing more of the Mother Flame for them, a weapon of mass destruction that totally wiped an island off the map, caused natural disasters all over the world, and is believed to be able to end all wars forever. It's hard to imagine some random orphan offering anything on that level. But if he was somehow an orphan celestial dragon to begin with that Mother Caramel got her hands on, that could suffice. But surviving a Big Mom massacre is just as hard to believe. The final celestial dragon here is just smiling and doesn't say anything at all. However, the design of their face kinda looks a bit like an old school manga character you might see from someone like Osamu Tezuka. Known as the godfather of manga, he created plenty of stories like Astro Boy and is pretty much Japan's version of Walt Disney. Between this guy and the one that kinda looks like the creator of Dragon Ball's mascot, some of the Holy Knights could very well be a homage to a few of Oda's greatest inspirations. The so-called rabbits were in turmoil and praying that this was all some horrible nightmare. They wondered how something like this could possibly happen. How could the world nobles so callously toy with the lives of their fellow men? But as they fired their guns, the Celestials made it clear that they viewed themselves as superior beings on every level. These two were reprimanded, however, since the event hadn't actually started yet, and were told to consider the other 200 participants as if prey worried about their young. There was only 1 hour left before the festival would officially commence, and the Celestial Dragons all looked forward to a good hunt. Meanwhile, over at Navy headquarters, Garp was on a Denden Mushi call with the Fleet Admiral. He wondered why his boss was trying to send him out to the boonies to fight while he's on vacation. The answer to that question was classified, but they absolutely needed Garp to be there. And of course, the Fleet Admiral at the time was none other than Kong. This guy is still such a mystery, but it's nice to be able to see him in his prime here. He admitted that the reports hadn't been verified just yet, but it was looking like this was going to be a major disaster. Seeing as this was connected to the Celestial Dragon's quote, little field trip, Garp didn't see much of a reason to care whether or not they were in trouble. Garp pulled an I told you so over clashing with Hachinosu because he knew it would eventually come back to bite them. After all, you can't just steal the crown jewel of Pirate Island and expect no retaliation. Okay, so the Rocks pirates went to God Valley to take back something very important that was stolen from them. That's why they seem to be in such a sudden rush during Kaido's flashback. But whatever this thing is, the question of how they stole it in the first place also remains. It would certainly be one hell of a twist if they abducted his son Teach or something. Kong was shocked that Garp knew about it and questioned where he'd gotten the information. Ignoring the question as he reclined with a smile on his face, Garp was sure that they assigned extra protection to the world nobles for being so stupid, so he didn't really see why the big man was so worked up. Kong then admitted that there was one thing they didn't account for at all. Gold D. Roger was headed there too. Now that got Garp's attention immediately. Kong definitely should have started with that because Garp was quick to say that he was on his way over. It's pretty crazy that Garp was totally sleeping on rocks, but the moment Roger was mentioned, it was like Vegeta hearing that Goku's doing some secret training. Sengoku described rocks as being Roger's first and possibly his greatest foe. So is the power differential between these two men that big, or is Garp's rivalry with Roger just that strong? Over in Hachinosu, a bunch of pirates were bickering about the Rocks pirates beating them to the punch and setting sail to God Valley. They even planned on heading over themselves. They already knew that this was going to shake the pirate world to its very core. So there were even more pirate crews headed to the island. Damn, this is already making Marineford look like a family picnic. Back over at God Valley, there were an unprecedented number of marine ships surrounding the island. While panting for breath, Ivankov let his fellow slaves know that they were all trapped in this hellish reality and nobody would be able to escape. He already knew that one day, this entire page of history would be lost. That's pretty damn insightful for a kid. He's totally right. Only a few members of the old generation are left to even remember it. By then, the Celestial Dragons had finally begun their slaughter. Eva knew that they chose God Valley for the sake of later plundering its abundant natural resources. 10,000 civilians now had targets on their backs and were marked for death. This rampage of theirs was planned to go on for a total of 3 weeks, and by the end of it, there wouldn't be a single survivor. He cursed the unfairness of the world they live in. The scene was utterly horrific. One of the older rabbits mentioned that they were told that they would be set free if they managed to survive until the end. This only infuriated Eva more since there were never any survivors of their previous hunts. They would be fools to think that this time would be any different. Another man would question why the world nobles would lie and give them false hope. That's when Eva delivered the harsh truth. Killing people that have already given up on life wouldn't be any fun for the freaks. They wanted the people to desperately cling to hope for the sake of having an enjoyable hunt. Winning this sadistic game was never a possibility for the slaves to begin with. Instead, their only chance of survival would be escaping altogether. And what a rampage! Garling's body count here would be enough to make even Big Mom blush. He carved into his prey on the back of what looked like an ostrich with goggles. Despite what should have been a detrimental negative 10,000 points for killing the island's king before the start, Garling had already made his way up to 10,000 points. The announcer alluded to going after high-value targets as his strategy. He may have already killed 2 super rares. The whole thing was being recorded thanks to Den Den Mushi surveillance, and it seemed like the ladies back at the Holy Land were loving what they saw from him. At the same time, Eva was in the middle of praising a sharkfish man for being able to bite through his restraints. The man wasn't exactly used to receiving compliments, however. Jinny, who was now wearing glasses, was monitoring the situation thanks to a trio of world government Den Den Mushi. She let the people around her know that the tournament's prizes would be the key to their escape, much to the confusion of the others. Continuing, Jinny exclaimed that one of them was a devil fruit of the highest caliber, one that would allow a person to transform into an azure dragon, what we know to be the Ua Ua no Mi modeled Seiryu, the mythical Zoan type that would eventually be eaten by Kaido. Additionally, there was also the Nikyu Nikyu no Mi, which was said to be able to launch oneself and others to distant lands. Obviously, this one ends up being Kuma's fruit, but it's interesting to see his bear motif instead be represented by a cat here. Totally reminds me of good old Captain Kuro. Eva was sure that if any of them managed to eat one of those fruits, they would be able to escape both the festival and Navy blockade, even if there were only a dozen of them. But a man among them didn't see how any of this would be possible on account of the prizes being kept at the center of the island. That's when Jinny chimed in to let them know that she's both a professional thief and wiretapper. In fact, 2 weeks ago, she leaked all this information to the outside world and was sure that her message managed to get at least someone's attention. She concluded that a plan like this needed plenty of decoys and distractions to take some of the heat off of them. So wow, Jinny is directly responsible for one of the biggest events in One Piece history. Despite being presented with this opportunity, most of the people among them were still too afraid to act. That's when Kuma volunteered himself for the job. He claimed that his size and build would allow him to survive longer than most others. When he admitted his desire not to see anyone else die trying, Jinny couldn't help but stare at him with wide eyes. Hearing this totally fired Ivankov up. He refused to let any of them be killed and proclaimed that they would all be escaping God Valley together. Soon after, the Navy ships were suddenly attacked. Just off the East Coast, they could see it. The Rocks pirates were here. They weren't sure why, but didn't have any time to lose. They were about to be swarmed by several pirate crews. One of the higher-ranking Marines among them commanded their forces to return fire as he wondered why this was the first time he was hearing about this. This may have done a number on the small fry surrounding them, but Rocks was confident in his and his crew's victory here. And just like the Super Smash Bros. Roster, everyone is here. We've got the prime Rocks pirates on full display. Whitebeard has Stussy riding his shoulder with what looks like a pufferfish fishman on his left and Strusen tucked in the corner. To the right was the former Empress of Amazon Lily, Gloriosa, Shiki, Baddie era Big Mom and Prometheus, Captain John, and a teenage Kaido, among a few others that are harder to see. Apparently, Rocks had already rushed ahead of them, and Whitebeard wasn't happy about it. Neither are we. He also questioned when he agreed to let an idiot like Rocks give him orders. Stussy was fawning over the big guy, while Gloriosa told her to back off and stop making a fool of herself. The fact that the old Empress was once a member of this legendary crew is actually insane. And she's looking damn good too. Now, you might be thinking that as a proud Kuja, and inherently their strongest warrior on account of being an empress, she was scolding Stussy for clinging so tightly to a man. But actually, we know that she left Amazon Lily after coming down with a sometimes fatal disease. It's the same one that Boa Hancock contracted because of Luffy, love sickness. So was Gloriosa in love with Whitebeard? Well, that sounds pretty rough considering the guy is all about having a bunch of sons, while as a Kuja, Gloriosa could only care for daughters. But then again, we know that she somehow managed to avoid dying to love sickness unlike her predecessors. So maybe she was in love with Rocks, and after he died, her problem was solved. Whatever the case, Stussy was quick to call the woman a total hypocrite. Shiki figured that they should all abide by the rules of finders keepers. On that note, Big Mom was ready to claim all the treasure for herself. John was excited too, but Kaido insisted that it would be pointless for Linlin to grab it. And that's because she already has Devil Fruit powers. And unless you're like Blackbeard, one is supposed to be the limit. Whitebeard was sure that Rocks would be dumb enough to lose sight of their main objective. As far as he was concerned, they needed to confirm that the primary target was here first and foremost. Oda is really teasing this mysterious treasure. I guess we can call this the two-piece. The Golden Lion yelled at Newgate, wondering who died and made him their leader, and promised to knock them all out of his way. Big Mom was certain that the treasure would be hers and that she'd grab it before anyone else. Kaido knew that Roger was on his way too. He looked pretty angry and was about to say something about the future Pirate King, but was interrupted by Big Mom telling the rookie to hold his horses. Stussy claimed that this would be the decisive battle, and John agreed wholeheartedly as he downed a drink. Glorioso was sure that this would be the day they finally settled things with the Roger Pirates. From there, we would also have two other mysterious figures. One could be the Silver Axe, and the other is probably Wang Shi. Two members of the Rocks Pirates that Sengoku mentioned before, but we didn't have bases to connect with. And crazy enough, this isn't our first time seeing Silver Axe. By the looks of things, he was one of Moria's zombies along with Captain John. Now, the guy we saw next to him certainly fits the name Silver Axe a lot more. I mean, he was in a completely silver suit of armor and had an axe with him. But at the same time, the zombie can't be Wang Shi, since that guy was at least alive for Blackbeard to steal Hachinosu from him in the modern era. Hard to say, and I'm not sure why Oda would still be keeping this shrouded in mystery, but I'm sure he has his reasons. Also, the four-armed guy you can just barely see with the other Rocks Pirates also ended up being one of Moria's zombies. Before long, the Rocks Pirates had made landfall. The Celestial Dragons were not happy about this at all, and were quick to reprimand the Marines that were meant to protect them. But again, there were plenty of other pirate crews to worry about here. They had no idea how their location was leaked or what the pirates were after. But while the Rocks Pirates invaded from the east, the west coast was now in danger too. Because the Roger Pirates have finally docked. And man, seeing Roger here as a captain without his signature mustache is unreal. He looks a lot like Oda's drawing of a 40-year-old ace. Like father, like son, I suppose. But without the facial hair, I wonder what their crew's Jolly Roger even looked like at this point. Roger was really excited to get in on the action after quite the year. Rayleigh admitted that the situation looked rough, while Gabon insisted that Roger not pull the captain card when it comes to calling dibs here. Now that the Roger Pirates were here, Garling ordered the Marines to pull back and ensure that the Celestial Dragons are protected. A person behind him with an animal skull over their head believed their current predicament to be a disgrace, considering they went to the trouble of surrounding the entire island with ships. Besides them, there was also a dark-haired woman. Garling told his fellow knights to stand by, and they were all prepared. I really wonder if the Holy Knights are just a bunch of old people at this point. The folks who were being hunted could only see things going from bad to worse here. Between the Roger Pirates and the Rocks Pirates, not even the Marines were sure that they would be able to survive. But just then, Marine reinforcements had arrived and were led by Vice Admiral Garp. Suddenly, their chance of survival had risen. Garp only cared about one thing here. He wanted to know where he would be able to find Roger. But bro, what has Bogard been eating? This man hasn't aged a single day. But thanks to all this chaos, Eva and the others were given a golden opportunity and made their way to the middle of the island. Opening up the chest, they managed to find the two devil fruits they were looking for. Although Eva wasn't really sure which was which, so they were both just going to eat them and find out. But just before they could, Eva was attacked by Big Mom, and she grabbed the devil fruit right out of his hands. I must say, Blue Dragon Eva would have been quite the funny sight to behold. I really hope Oda lets us see what that would have looked like at some point, but it's only natural that the fruit was taken from him, considering what we know about Zoan types having a will of their own and sort of choosing their wielders. Also, based on what we've seen from Momonosuke's use of the power, their plan to fly away on the back of a dragon probably wouldn't have gone very well. Momo may have only had an artificial version of it, but the only real difference is the fact that it turns him pink instead of blue. It took Momo a while to master the whole flame cloud thing. And before he went from being 3'7" to more than 12 feet tall like his dad, his dragon form was tiny. So it's likely that only the dragon's head would have been big if Eva got it. Lin wanted the paw fruit too, so Eva told his friend not to think and just to eat it. And unlike most, Kuma ate the entire thing whole. Eva insisted that his friend needed to save them, that if they could manage to get even a single person off of this hellish island alive, then they'd be able to call this a true victory over their captors. But just then, Kuma was struck by the overpowering glare of Saint J. Garcia Saturn of the Five Elders. As black lightning and flames surrounded him, he recognized Kuma to be the Buccaneer child. He explained that either the boy can live as a slave or die. Absolutely nothing else will be tolerated for a member of his kind. That this was what the tides of time had decided. To this, Kuma asked the old man if he was someone important. He couldn't understand how someone could be born to be more or less than someone else. If a person could be born to be a slave, he wanted to know what was the point of being born in the first place. Despite the pain he was in and the obvious struggle to move, which we even saw restrict Sanji in the present day, Kuma insisted that if he had some kind of power, he would use it to save as many people as he possibly could. Just like the sun god and warrior of liberation, Nika, the declaration of which only seemed to further infuriate the Elder Star. Apparently, this was exactly why his race needed to be erased. Elsewhere, Roger planned on stopping Rocks, who in turn told Roger to get out of his way. And I know that everyone and their mother wants to see more, but unfortunately, the remainder of this world-shaking event would be obscured by the shadows of history. But thankfully, it's just the beginning of many others, and we are definitely coming back to this. There's no way that we're just skipping over the rest of God Valley. We still need to see Rocks, and there are plenty of secrets yet to uncover. Kuma managed to take himself and his friends from the West Blue to the South Blue. Namely, the island of his birth, the Sorbet Kingdom, the only other place he was familiar with. Eva was annoyed to see that only Garp's heroism ended up being reported. To him, Morgan's was just a total hack that just prints whatever the world government wants. Ultimately, they still had no idea what really happened on the island after they left, or who ended up responding to Jinny's information leak. But on the point of Morgan's, it's crazy to think that he would have this level of pull considering he should only be around 15 years old right now. Is the newspaper maybe a family business? We know that Big Bird sometimes goes off script and publishes information that upsets the Gorosei, but maybe his predecessor wasn't as liberal. Eva wondered how long Kuma planned on praying, but the big fella couldn't help but think about the fact that he might have been able to save more people back then. But Eva was quick to tell his friend not to be so hard on himself. After all, he managed to save more than 500 people during all that mayhem. 500 out of more than 10,000 might not sound like much, but considering the circumstances, it's pretty damn impressive. Not only did he just get his hands on the Devil Fruit power and never been in a fight before in his life, but he was also facing Saint Saturn. Jinny also complimented him and was now calling him Kumachi or Teddy, which is just adorable. Everyone he saved cried tears of sincere gratitude, herself included, which wasn't hard to imagine since she was doing that right now. We know that Celestial Dragons gathered more people to be hunted than just the people of God Valley, so some of them may have ended up becoming revolutionaries or their allies. Eva proclaimed that Kuma's hands could bless people with freedom. He even called them the Hands of Liberation, which really seemed to resonate with the ever-faithful Kuma. Nikyu and Nika are pretty similar names. Speaking of which, Kuma now planned on living in a church. It was a bit strange to him, but Eva had to admit that it fit his friend's personality pretty well. Later on, Eva told them that he would be going off to sea and planned on basking in his own freedom. Kuma smiled and told his friend that he would never forget his face for as long as he lives. And man, Oda, you didn't need to do that one. That really hurt. Kuma is such a sweetheart, man. I feel like I'm gonna be pissed every time I see a pacifista from now on. Eva let him know that nobody ever forgets a face like his. Jinny was smiling too, but apologized to her big bro since she wasn't planning on joining him. She wanted to stay with Kuma while she figures out what to do with her life. From there, they said their goodbyes, but would one day meet again. After that, seeing as she was 4 years older than him, making her 13, she insisted that Kuma let her figure out how they're going to get their hands on some food. Remember, she's a professional thief. Together, the two of them chopped wood, which lines up with Oda's original depiction of a young Kuma. But from now on, they were going to work hard and buy their own food legitimately. Soon after, two kids were throwing rocks at Kuma and mocking him for claiming to be 9 years old despite being so big. But that just scored them a beating from Jinny. Using the power of his fruit, Kuma removed the pain from their beating. And if you notice, these same kids eventually grow up to be members of the Bonnie Pirates. Kuma was happy to help them while they believed he used some kind of magic or something. After that, they all became friends and even helped out as Jinny sang a song about Kuma that seemed to be a reference to the theme of Winnie the Pooh, which totally blew my mind. Kuma is Winnie the Pooh and Bonnie is Piglet. After returning to their home, the two enjoyed a well-deserved meal. But even after eating, Jinny had to admit that she was still hungry. With that, Kuma touched her heart by offering his food and filling her stomach. Jinny was having a great time. Seeing that she was such a glutton, Kuma wanted them to keep up the good work. Looking out the window, Jinny asked Kuma how old he was when he became a slave. When he told her he was 4, she replied that it was the same for her with a ton of enthusiasm. But Kuma wasn't sure that that was something to be excited about. With that in mind, I really wonder where and how she managed to gain her wiretapping and theft skills. Jinny struggled to speak as she mentioned the fact that her belly was actually full for once. Kuma looked over his shoulder and wondered what was wrong. Jinny broke down into tears as she called out to him. This only made him begin to cry just as much as he told her not to. But she couldn't help it, she was just so happy. This was their first taste of peace and hope. Bonnie's mom is Jinny is pretty much confirmed. One Piece is really a special kind of series. Usually shonen villains are so cool that despite all the terrible things they do, you can't help but be a fan. But not these celestial dragons, man. I need to see each and every one of them get clapped. I don't care about Garling's connection to Shanks. I need to see that man dragged by that reverse Jessie from Pokemon hairdo he has. I don't even know how you'd begin to get retribution for all that the world nobles have done, but I do know that we need to get it started. No Monkey D. Dragon in all of this, but I need to see Luffy's pops pop off real soon. It's about damn time. After all they've done to Kuma, we need to see what the so-called world's worst criminal can really do. But yeah guys, this was one hell of a chapter with plenty to break down. The spoiler folks might have gassed this one up a little too much, but it was absolute flames either way. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.